Hey, I'm Sophia with Garden State Film Festival, and I am here with the director, writer, and producer of the documentary feature Amen, 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 A Story of Our Times, Tom Gallagher. Tom, thanks so much for taking the time out to talk to us today.
I'm really happy to, Sophia. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Congratulations on making a documentary feature. Definitely not an easy thing to do. I know a lot went into making this. So let's get this started by you telling our audiences a little bit about the documentary.
Sure. So in December of 2018, I was in Abu Dhabi, which is part of the United Arab Emirates. And I was with my friend John Sexton, the president emeritus of NYU and co founder of New York University in Abu Dhabi. And John shared with me the fact that the Jewish community in the Emirates proposed to present His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, now the president of the United Arab Emirates, with a Torah scroll dedicated to the late Sheikh Zayed, the founding father of the UAE, in a private ceremony. And the Jewish experts in the film believe that this dedication of a Torah scroll in honor of an Arab Muslim ruler is the first time in the history of the world that such a gift has been dedicated and presented. So I was able to secure access to the gift ceremony itself, which took place in November of 2019. And it struck me when we started thinking about this film and pursuing it, that many in the West, and mostly Christians, but many others, when they think of the Middle East, they think of ongoing and terrible conflict between Jews and Muslims, and we're seeing it in the last few days in the news. This story tells a counter narrative, a narrative where the Jewish community in the Emirates is encouraged to practice their faith tradition. They do it peacefully. They live in neighborhoods with Arab Muslims and others. And so I felt very passionately that this story of communities, diverse communities living well together, needed to be brought to a broader audience through a documentary.
Wow. And I know that this documentary has been winning awards around the world. It's been premiering internationally. It even is available on flight for an airline. And now you're here screening in New Jersey, Garden State Film Festival. When you first decided that, okay, let's make a documentary about this, did you know it was going to hit on this global level that it is?
Well, thank you. No, my team and I, including Gary Vandenberg, who is a New Jersey native, we knew we had a good story. So that was really what drove us. And then the key really was getting out of the way of the story. So to let the key people involved in this story tell this unique story of living in an Arab Muslim country and being to practice their Jewish faith. So we had a good story. We wanted to get out of the way of the story. And with the help of many people, as you see listed in the credits, the film came to life, and it's been very well received, as you said, around the world.
And what were your hopes in making this documentary? Was it pure just education purposes, or just enlightening this to everyone? Like, what was the message for this documentary?
Well, I wanted people to understand that on the Arabian Gulf, across from Iran, as a matter of fact, in this small 7 emirate country, the United Arab Emirates, religious pluralism is essentially a public virtue that the late Sheikh Zayed, the founding father of the UAE, instilled this notion of welcoming the stranger. And when you look at where the UAE sits on the Gulf, it's a major shipping route. And so naturally, as the ships came in, they had crew members of all different faith traditions. And so this really is a bright spot in terms of religious pluralism. And I wanted to bring that message to people in the West, so they understand that peace and thriving communities with different faith traditions can actually live, become neighbors, become friends, be coworkers, and practice their own tradition.
Right, absolutely. So tell me about the wonderful people that you guys got to interview for this documentary. How did you find them and how were you able to, yeah, interview them and put it in this documentary?
So in 2019, I began January 2019 in earnest to start collecting interviews, undertaking interviews with people in the U.S. and people in the UAE. Um, and when March of 2020 came and the pandemic broke out, we were determined to continue to interview people in the Emirates, in London, in Sydney, Australia, in Texas. And even though I couldn't travel, I ended up using about 6 or 7 location producers in London, in Dubai, in Abu Dhabi, in Sydney, Australia, in Texas, to overcome the impediment of the lack of travel because of COVID. So the list of interviewees included members of the Jewish community today in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, um, about a dozen members of the Jewish community who were in the United Arab Emirates but have since returned home. Many of them are in London now, and they were kind of the early members of the Jewish community. So we interviewed them to get a historical perspective. Um, we then interviewed uh, various government officials in the United Arab Emirates. And if we weren't able to interview them directly because of the COVID, we got footage of them speaking to the issue of religious pluralism. One question I get asked a lot is, um, did the UAE government fund this film? And the answer is no. The film was funded by predominantly Jewish philanthropists in the US, but we didn't take any government funds. And then the other question I get asked sometimes is, um, did the UAE government have to approve the film or have any editorial control? And one of the conditions of doing this film is that my team and I needed to have full editorial control. Uh, and we weren't asked to give up control, but we had to make it very clear to various officials that this was going to be independently produced. We committed to staying on the subject of religious pluralism as opposed to some sort of wide-ranging review of the entire country. When you see the film, you'll see that the focus was always on religious pluralism and through the experience of this newly formed Jewish community.
Wow, and that is so impressive to hear that with the pandemic, you still got this going by finding people in these different areas that you were filming. And did you direct that remotely?
Um, a couple of the interviews I did direct remotely, but the one thing my team and I did is we prepared 15 or 20 questions
Mm.
that we needed this particular interviewee to answer. And by doing that, we could orchestrate the the inputs from each of the people being interviewed, so they didn't overlap and weren't redundant. So, despite the inability to travel, the subsequent interviews came off pretty well, and each of the location producers did a very good job.
Yeah, they absolutely did. And it really just baffles my mind that this is your first time filmmaking. I read in your bio that you're a lawyer and a journalist. How do you think you were so successful as a first time filmmaker?
Well, I do. It becomes kind of funny when someone says, "So, how many of these films have you done?" And I say one. Um, but the thing that took some of that risk out is that I knew what the story was, and I knew what the story I wanted to tell. I've traveled to the UAE many times, um, and so I knew very clearly what the story was. I also felt that I could find smart technical people like Gary Vandenberg, my video editor, and others to fill in the gaps on the technical side to execute the film. And then because of the pandemic, we relied on B-roll from Reuters, the Associated Press, Vatican Media, and others to fill in where we weren't able to go back into country to get the B-roll we needed. So I felt confident about the story, about getting the story, and then I was able to build out a team that could execute it.
Wonderful. And obviously, this is such an important story to you and for the world. So I'm curious to know if you guys ran into, besides, the pandemic and the many challenges that you did mention, what was the biggest challenge for you when it came to making this documentary, or maybe even after the fact, if you guys have been running into any challenges screening this?
Well, the big challenge was editing. So the original film is about 72 minutes. And then when WNET, PBS in New York City wanted to run the film, they said, can you cut it to 58 minutes? And so we did. And we're very happy with that cut down. But I think the biggest challenge is knowing when to edit the film to a length that felt good to the viewer to watch. And it wasn't too long, it wasn't too winding, the pacing was good. And so a lot of time and energy went into thinking about what is absolutely needed for this story and then what could we get rid of. And so we made a lot of choices around tightening the film so that it had a certain built-in energy to it, and didn't sort of meander.
Right. And like looking back at this, is there some advice you can give to other filmmakers who want to make a project of this magnitude?
So I would say the most important lesson I learned is simply you have to know the story.
Mm.
I think there were times where I had a couple of contractors, producer types who were responsible for a particular interview, and the interview didn't yield a lot of helpful content. And so once I took over the film and really drove it, we were very disciplined on how we used our budget for interviews. And so, for example, I might have 70 hours of footage right now in my hard drives, and we needed 1 hour. So if I go back and looked at all that film, I'm sure I could have cut many of those hours. So I think, budget discipline, have a really sharp focus on the story you want to tell, and then, be determined to tell that story.
Thank you. And my last question for you is, was there or is there like a target audience that you want to see this film, or is it really anyone, anywhere, can digest and learn something from this?
So I have a version of the film with Hebrew subtitles, and I have a version of the film with Arabic subtitles. And so I would love broader distribution in Hebrew speaking communities, particularly in Israel, and then broader distribution in Arab countries. And then in the US, for example, it's been on PBS in New York City, but I'd love to have PBS all over the country air the film. I think for high schoolers, for example, it's a very good tutorial about the region. For college students who are interested in political affairs or interfaith relations, it's an important film, educational film. And for many of us who are Christian particularly, but even Jewish, it really offers some important insights into what's happening in the Arabian Gulf and the United Arab Emirates, between people of many different faiths living in an Arab Muslim country peacefully and able to practice their faith. So I think it's a film that everyone in the world can benefit from. And been heartened that many places in the world, festivals are responding favorably to the film.
Me too. And I completely agree. I'm so happy for our audiences at Garden State Film Festival to see this documentary. Let me tell them quickly how they can see Amen, 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 a story of our times. It will be screening Sunday, March 26th in the film block 2:45 to 4:45 p.m. in the Berkeley Hotel in the Continental Room. So definitely check it out. And I believe you will be there, Tom.
I'm planning on it. Yep.
Lovely. I hope that stays, and hopefully I can meet you at the film festival. Thanks again for taking the time out to talk to us today.
Thanks, Sophia. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Have a great day.
All
Bye,
right, you too.
Tom.
Bye.